The racist teacher bullied a black student mercilessly. But when the principal walked in, Westfield High School stood as a beacon of education in the heart of a diverse suburban community. Its halls echoed with the chatter of students from various backgrounds, a melting pot of cultures and experiences. However, beneath the surface of this seemingly harmonious environment, tension simmered, waiting for the right catalyst to bring them to a boil. Dr. Marcus Thompson, the newly appointed principal of Westfield High, was determined to make a difference. At 45, he was a tall, imposing figure with kind eyes that sparkled with intelligence behind his wire-rimmed glasses. His dark skin bore testament to his African-American heritage, a fact that had made his journey to this position all the more challenging and rewarding. Marcus had worked his way up through the ranks of the education system, facing discrimination and skepticism at every turn. But his unwavering dedication to students and his innovative approaches to learning had finally earned him this prestigious position. He was determined to use his role to create a truly inclusive environment where every student could thrive. His son, Jamal Thompson, was starting his junior year at Westfield High. At 16, Jamal was a bright, ambitious student with a passion for science and a dream of becoming an astrophysicist. He had inherited his father's height and warm brown eyes, along with a quiet confidence that belied his age. Jamal was excited about the opportunity to attend the school where his father worked, even though they had agreed to keep their relationship low-key to avoid any appearance of favoritism. On the other side of the spectrum was Ms. Veronica Hawthorne, a veteran English teacher at Westfield High. At 55, she was a petite woman with graying blonde hair and piercing blue eyes that could freeze a misbehaving student in their tracks. Veronica had been teaching at Westfield for over 2 decades and prided herself on her traditional teaching methods and her ability to maintain strict discipline in her classroom. Unknown to her colleagues and students, Veronica harbored deep-seated prejudices that she had managed to keep hidden beneath a veneer of professionalism. She viewed the increasing diversity of the student body with growing unease, longing for what she considered the good old days when the school was less diverse. As the new school year began, these 3 individuals, Marcus, Jamal, and Veronica, were on a collision course that would shake the foundations of Westfield High and force the entire community to confront uncomfortable truths about race, education, and the power of standing up for what's right. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test the values of the school, the resilience of a father and son, and the deeply ingrained beliefs of a teacher who was about to face a reckoning she never saw coming. The first day of the new school year dawned bright and clear, filled with the nervous energy of students returning to their academic routines. Jamal Thompson walked through the doors of Westfield High, his backpack slung over one shoulder, a mixture of excitement and apprehension coursing through him. As he navigated the crowded hallways, Jamal couldn't help but feel a sense of pride, knowing his father was now at the helm of this institution. However, he was determined to make his own way, to be known for his own merits, rather than his connection to the principal. Jamal's first class of the day was Advanced English Literature with Ms. Hawthorne. He had heard rumors about her strict teaching style and high expectations, but he was confident in his abilities and eager to learn. As students filed into the classroom, Ms. Hawthorne stood at the front, her steely gaze assessing each newcomer. When Jamal entered, her eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly, a flicker of something unreadable passing across her face. "Welcome, class," Ms. Hawthorne began once everyone was seated. "I am Ms. Hawthorne, and this is Advanced English Literature. I want to make one thing clear from the start. This is a rigorous course designed for serious students. If you're not prepared to work hard and meet my exacting standards, I suggest you leave now." Her eyes swept the room, lingering for a moment on Jamal. "Now, let's see what you're made of. Pop quiz on summer reading." A collective groan rose from the class, but Miss Hawthorne was already distributing papers. Jamal took a deep breath, focusing on the questions before him. He had thoroughly enjoyed the assigned books and felt well prepared. As the students worked, Miss Hawthorne paced the room, her heels clicking ominously on the linoleum floor. When she passed Jamal's desk, she paused, peering over his shoulder. "Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice carrying through the quiet classroom. "I hope you're not planning to rely on, shall we say, alternative methods to succeed in this class." Jamal looked up, confusion evident on his face. "I'm sorry, Miss Hawthorne. I don't understand what you mean." "I mean, Mr. Thompson, that in this classroom, we value original thought and hard work. Copying or plagiarism of any kind will not be tolerated." The implication hung heavy in the air. Jamal felt his cheeks burn as he realized what she was insinuating. "Miss Hawthorne, I would never cheat. I've done all the reading, and I'm just answering the questions to the best of my ability." Miss Hawthorne's lips thinned into a tight smile. "We shall see, Mr. Thompson. We shall see." As she moved away, Jamal could feel the eyes of his classmates on him. He tried to refocus on his quiz, but Miss Hawthorne's words kept echoing in his mind. When the bell rang, signaling the end of class, Miss Hawthorne called out, "Mr. Thompson, a word, please." Jamal approached her desk, his heart pounding. "Yes, Miss Hawthorne?" "I want to make something clear, Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice low. "I've seen many students come through this school thinking they can coast by on charm or connections, but in my class, everyone starts on equal footing. Your background won't earn you any special treatment here." Jamal blinked, taken aback by her words. "Miss Hawthorne, I'm not looking for special treatment. I'm here to learn, just like everyone else." "Good," she replied, her tone making it clear the conversation was over. "You may go." As Jamal left the classroom, his mind was reeling. He had never experienced such blatant prejudice from a teacher before. Part of him wanted to run straight to his father's office and report what had happened, but another part, the part that wanted to prove himself on his own merits, held him back. Throughout the rest of the day, Jamal couldn't shake the feeling of unease that Miss Hawthorne's words had instilled in him. He found himself second-guessing his every interaction, wondering if other teachers and students were judging him based on his race or perceived connections. As the final bell rang, Jamal made his way to his locker, his mind heavy with the events of the day. He was so lost in thought that he almost bumped into his father in the hallway. "Jamal," Dr. Thompson said, his voice warm. "How was your first day?" For a moment, Jamal considered telling his father everything. But looking at the pride and hope shining in his dad's eyes, he couldn't bring himself to tarnish this moment. "It was interesting, Dad," he said finally. "I've got a lot to learn." As they walked out of the school together, maintaining a professional distance, neither father nor son realized that this was just the beginning of a challenging journey that would test their relationship, their principles, and the very fabric of Westfield High. In the weeks that followed, Jamal found himself increasingly targeted by Miss Hawthorne's subtle yet persistent discrimination. Her comments, always just on the edge of propriety, chipped away at his confidence. She questioned his work more rigorously than other students, often implying that he couldn't possibly have come up with his ideas on his own. One afternoon, as Jamal was working on a group project in the library, he overheard a conversation that made his blood run cold. "I'm telling you," a hushed voice said, "Miss Hawthorne's got it out for that Thompson kid. I heard her talking to Mr. Roberts about how certain students don't belong in advanced classes." "No way," another voice replied. "Isn't that like super racist?" "Shh, keep your voice down. But yeah, it's messed up. She keeps hinting that he must be cheating or getting help because there's no way he could be that smart on his own." Jamal's hands trembled as he processed what he had just heard. It wasn't just in his head. Miss Hawthorne really was singling him out because of his race. Determined to gather more evidence, Jamal began paying closer attention to Miss Hawthorne's interactions with other students. He noticed how she lavished praise on white students for work similar to what he produced, how she seemed to call on students of color less frequently, and how her criticism of their work was often harsher. As he collected mental notes, Jamal also started discreetly recording Miss Hawthorne's classes on his phone. He captured several instances of her making thinly veiled racist comments and showing clear bias in her grading and feedback. The final piece of evidence came when Jamal was staying late after school to work on a science project. As he passed by the teacher's lounge, he heard Miss Hawthorne's distinctive voice. "I'm telling you, Carol, standards have really slipped since they started this diversity push," Miss Hawthorne was saying. Half these kids don't have the background to keep up with a rigorous curriculum. Take that Thompson boy, for instance. Bright enough, I suppose, but clearly out of his depth in advanced classes. I wouldn't be surprised if he's getting extra help, if you know what I mean. Jamal felt as if he'd been punched in the gut. The casual cruelty of Miss Hawthorne's words, the easy dismissal of his abilities based solely on his race, left him reeling. In that moment, Jamal made a decision. He couldn't keep this to himself any longer. The discrimination he was facing wasn't just affecting him, it was potentially harming other students of color as well. He needed to take action. With shaking hands, Jamal pulled out his phone and began recording, capturing Miss Hawthorne's continued racist tirade. As he listened, he felt a mix of anger, hurt, and a strange sense of relief. Finally, he had concrete proof of what he had been experiencing. As Miss Hawthorne's voice faded and he heard chairs scraping inside the lounge, Jamal quickly retreated, his mind racing. He now had evidence of Miss Hawthorne's racism, but what should he do with it? Should he go to his father? To the school board? Or should he confront Miss Hawthorne directly? The weight of this knowledge pressed down on Jamal as he made his way home. He knew that whatever he decided to do next would have far-reaching consequences, not just for him, but for the entire school community. As he walked, he steeled himself for the difficult conversations and decisions that lay ahead, knowing that the path to justice was rarely easy or straightforward. Jamal spent a sleepless night wrestling with his discovery. The evidence of Miss Hawthorne's racism weighed heavily on his conscience, demanding action. By morning, he had made his decision. He would confront the issue head-on, but not alone. After school the next day, Jamal approached his best friend, Sophia Rodriguez, a fellow junior and student council member. He shared what he had discovered, including the recordings he had made. Sophia's eyes widened as she listened. "Jamal, this is serious. We can't let her get away with this. We need to tell someone." Jamal nodded, a mix of determination and apprehension on his face. "I know. I think we need to go to my dad. As the principal, he needs to know what's happening in his school." Together, they made their way to Dr. Thompson's office. As they entered, Dr. Thompson looked up from his paperwork, surprise registering on his face at the serious expressions of the two students. "Jamal, Sophia, what's going on?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. Taking a deep breath, Jamal began to explain. He told his father everything, the subtle discrimination he had faced, the conversations he had overheard, and finally, he played the recording of Miss Hawthorne's racist rant in the teacher's lounge. As he listened, Dr. Thompson's expression transformed from concern to shock, and finally to a controlled anger. When Jamal finished, there was a moment of heavy silence. "I'm so sorry you've had to go through this, son," Dr. Thompson said finally, his voice tight with emotion. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention. I want you to know that I'm proud of you for standing up and speaking out." He turned to Sophia. "Thank you to you, Sophia, for supporting Jamal and for being here. What happens next needs to be handled carefully and officially." Dr. Thompson explained that he would need to report this to the school board and initiate a formal investigation. He assured them that their identities would be protected as much as possible, but warned that there might be backlash once the investigation became public. As Jamal and Sophia left the office, they felt a mix of relief and anxiety. They had taken the first step towards justice, but they knew the road ahead would be challenging. The consequences of Jamal's decision began to unfold rapidly. Within days, Miss Hawthorne was placed on administrative leave pending the investigation. The school board called an emergency meeting to discuss the allegations and the evidence presented. News of the investigation spread through the school like wildfire. Students and teachers alike were shocked by the accusations against Miss Hawthorne, who had been a fixture at Westfield for so long. The school became divided, with some defending Ms. Hawthorne and others rallying behind the cause of racial justice. Jamal found himself at the center of a storm he hadn't fully anticipated. While many students and teachers supported him, offering words of encouragement and sharing their own stories of discrimination, others viewed him with suspicion or outright hostility. "Snitch," someone had scrawled on his locker one morning. In the cafeteria, he could feel the weight of stares and hear the whispers that followed him. Some students, particularly those who had been favored by Miss Hawthorne, accused him of exaggerating or making up the allegations for attention. The stress began to take its toll on Jamal. His grades started to slip as he struggled to concentrate in class, constantly aware of the scrutiny he was under. He found himself second-guessing every interaction, wondering who he could trust. At home, the situation was equally tense. While Dr. Thompson fully supported his son's decision to come forward, he was now facing his own challenges. Some members of the school board questioned his objectivity in handling the investigation, given his personal connection to the case. There were whispers about whether he was fit to lead the school through this crisis. One evening, as Jamal sat at the dinner table pushing food around his plate, his mother reached out and took his hand. "Jamal," she said softly, "we are so proud of you for standing up for what's right. But remember, you don't have to carry this burden alone. We're here for you, always." Jamal looked up, seeing the love and concern in his parents' eyes. For the first time in weeks, he felt the emotional dam inside him break. He told them everything: his fears, his doubts, the toll the situation was taking on him. As they talked late into the night, Jamal realized that while his decision had set in motion a difficult and painful process, it was also an opportunity for real change. He had sparked a conversation about race and discrimination that the school, and perhaps the wider community, had long needed to have. In the days that followed, Jamal made a conscious decision to turn the negative attention into a positive force. With Sophia's help, he began organizing discussion groups for students to talk about their experiences with discrimination and brainstorm ways to make the school more inclusive. As he watched students from all backgrounds coming together, sharing stories and ideas, Jamal felt a glimmer of hope. The path ahead was still uncertain, fraught with challenges and potential setbacks. But he was no longer alone in his fight. He had set in motion a movement that was bigger than himself, and he was determined to see it through, whatever the consequences might be. While Jamal's story was unfolding at the forefront of Westfield High, a secondary plot was developing behind the scenes, adding layers of complexity to the already tense situation. Sarah Chen, a young and idealistic English teacher who had joined the faculty the previous year, found herself increasingly troubled by the events surrounding Miss Hawthorne's case. She had always admired Miss Hawthorne's teaching methods, but the allegations of racism had forced her to reevaluate her mentor's influence. As Sarah delved deeper into the issue, she began to notice patterns of bias in the school's curriculum and policies that she had previously overlooked. She started questioning the lack of diversity in the literature they taught, the subtle ways in which students of color were often overlooked for advanced classes, and the disproportionate disciplinary actions taken against minority students. Determined to make a difference, Sarah approached Dr. Thompson with a proposal for a comprehensive review of the school's curriculum and policies. Her initiative, while well-intentioned, added another layer of complexity to Dr. Thompson's already precarious position. Meanwhile, Robert Hawthorne, Miss Hawthorne's son and a prominent lawyer in the community, had caught wind of the investigation. Furious at what he saw as an attack on his mother's reputation, he began building a legal case against the school, claiming that the investigation was biased and that his mother was being unfairly targeted. Robert's involvement escalated the situation, turning what had been a school matter into a potential legal battle. His threats of a lawsuit put additional pressure on the school board, some of whom began to waver in their support of Dr. Thompson's handling of the case. As tensions rose, a group of students inspired by Jamal's courage formed a coalition called Students for Equality. Led by Sofia Rodriguez, they began organizing peaceful protests and awareness campaigns, demanding transparency in the investigation and calling for broader reforms in the school's approach to diversity and inclusion. The formation of this student group caught the attention of local media, bringing the Westfield High controversy into the public spotlight. News vans began appearing outside the school, and reporters sought interviews with students, teachers, and administrators. The increased scrutiny made some teachers nervous. A few, who had previously turned a blind eye to instances of discrimination, now feared that their past inactions might come to light. This led to a wave of performative allyship, with some faculty members suddenly becoming vocal supporters of diversity initiatives, even as they privately worried about their own culpability. Amidst this turmoil, an unexpected ally emerged for Jamal and Dr. Thompson. Mr. Erickson, a veteran history teacher nearing retirement, came forward with years of documented incidents of racial bias at Westfield High. He had been keeping a personal record, hoping that one day someone would have the courage to address the systemic issues he had observed throughout his career. Mr. Erickson's records provided crucial context for the current situation, demonstrating that Ms. Hawthorne's actions were not isolated incidents, but part of a larger pattern of institutional racism that had gone unchecked for years. As these various threads began to intertwine, the atmosphere at Westfield High grew increasingly charged. The school had become a microcosm of the broader societal struggle with racism and discrimination, with every action and reaction scrutinized and debated. Dr. Thompson found himself navigating an increasingly complex web of competing interests and agendas. He knew that his handling of this situation would have far-reaching consequences, not just for his son and Miss Hawthorne, but for the entire school community and potentially for educational institutions beyond Westfield High. As the investigation progressed and tensions continued to mount, it became clear that Westfield High was on the brink of a transformation. Whether that change would be for better or worse remained to be seen, but one thing was certain: the school would never be the same again. In the midst of the turmoil engulfing Westfield High, the relationship between Jamal and his father, Dr. Thompson, underwent a profound transformation. The professional distance they had maintained at school began to crumble under the weight of their shared struggle. One evening, as they sat in Dr. Thompson's study at home, the facade finally broke. Jamal, overwhelmed by the day's events, let out a frustrated sigh. "Dad, I don't know if I can keep doing this. Maybe it would have been better if I had just kept quiet." Dr. Thompson looked at his son, seeing not just a student, but a young man grappling with the harsh realities of the world. He moved to sit beside Jamal on the couch. "Son, what you did took immense courage. It's never easy to stand up against injustice, especially when it comes from those in authority." Jamal met his father's gaze, vulnerability evident in his eyes. "But what if it doesn't change anything? What if it only makes things worse?" Dr. Thompson placed a comforting hand on Jamal's shoulder. "Change is never easy or quick, Jamal. But by speaking up, you've already made a difference. You've sparked a conversation that this school and this community has needed to have for a long time." As they talked late into the night, the barriers between principal and student, father and son, began to blur. Jamal opened up about the full extent of the discrimination he had faced, not just from Miss Hawthorne, but from other subtle biases he had encountered throughout his academic journey. Dr. Thompson, in turn, shared his own experiences with racism, both as a student and as an educator climbing the ranks of school administration. He spoke of the challenges he faced as a black man in a position of authority, constantly having to prove himself worthy of his role. This newfound openness strengthened their bond, creating a deeper understanding between them. Jamal began to see his father not just as an authority figure, but as a mentor and ally in his fight for justice. At school, their interactions took on a new dimension. While they still maintained a professional demeanor in public, there was an unspoken understanding between them, a shared purpose that went beyond the typical student-principal relationship. This shift didn't go unnoticed. Sophia, observing the subtle changes in their dynamic, approached Jamal one day after a student coalition meeting. "You and Dr. Thompson seem different lately," she remarked. "Closer somehow." Jamal hesitated, then decided to trust his friend with the truth. "He's my father, Sophia," he admitted quietly. Sophia's eyes widened in surprise, then understanding dawned on her face. "That explains so much," she said. "It must be incredibly difficult for both of you dealing with all of this." Her acceptance and support further cemented their friendship, providing Jamal with another pillar of strength as he navigated the challenging waters of his newfound activism. As the weeks passed, Jamal and Dr. Thompson's relationship continued to evolve. They found themselves working side by side, albeit often behind the scenes, to address the issues of racism and discrimination at Westfield High. Dr. Thompson began to include Jamal in discussions about potential policy changes, valuing his perspective as both a student and someone who had directly experienced discrimination within the school. Jamal, in turn, helped his father understand the student body's concerns and aspirations, bridging the gap between the administration and the student-led movements for change. Their collaboration extended to the home front as well. Family dinners became strategy sessions, with Jamal's mother often providing valuable insights from her perspective as a community organizer. The Thompson household became a hub of ideas and plans for creating a more inclusive educational environment. However, this newfound closeness also brought challenges. There were times when the line between personal and professional became blurred, leading to heated disagreements about the best course of action. These conflicts tested their relationship, but ultimately strengthened it, as they learned to navigate their dual roles. One particularly poignant moment came when Dr. Thompson was called before the school board to defend his handling of the investigation. As he prepared to leave for the meeting, Jamal stopped him at the door. "Dad," he said, his voice filled with emotion, "whatever happens in there, I want you to know that I'm proud to be your son. You've taught me what it means to lead with integrity, even when it's difficult." Dr. Thompson pulled Jamal into a fierce hug, blinking back tears. "And I'm proud of you, son," he replied. "You've shown me what true courage looks like." As Dr. Thompson left for the meeting, both father and son felt the weight of the moment. They knew that whatever the outcome, their relationship had been forever changed by this experience. They had become not just family, but true partners in the fight for justice and equality at Westfield High. The day of the school board's final hearing arrived, bringing with it a palpable tension that hung over Westfield High like a storm cloud. The school's auditorium, chosen to accommodate the large crowd expected to attend, was packed to capacity. Students, teachers, parents, and community members filled every seat, their murmured conversations creating a low buzz of anticipation. Jamal sat in the front row, flanked by Sophia and other members of the Students for Equality Coalition. His parents were notably absent, as Dr. Thompson had been asked to recuse himself from the proceedings due to his personal connection to the case. As the board members filed in and took their seats on the stage, a hush fell over the room. The board chair, a stern-looking woman in her 60s, called the meeting to order. "We are here today," she began, "to address the allegations of racial discrimination brought against Ms. Veronica Hawthorne, and to determine the appropriate course of action for Westfield High moving forward." What followed was a tense and emotionally charged hearing. Witnesses were called, evidence was presented, and passionate arguments were made on both sides. Ms. Hawthorne, appearing publicly for the first time since being placed on leave, vehemently denied any wrongdoing, claiming that her words and actions had been misinterpreted. "I have dedicated my life to education," she said, her voice quavering with emotion. "I have always held all my students to high standards, regardless of their background. To accuse me of racism is not only false, but deeply hurtful." Her son, Robert, followed with a fiery speech, accusing the school of conducting a witch hunt and threatening legal action if his mother wasn't fully exonerated. Then came the testimony that would change everything. Mr. Erickson, the veteran history teacher, took the stand. With a steady voice, he presented his years of documented incidents, painting a damning picture of systemic racism within Westfield High. "What we're dealing with here is not just one teacher's actions," he concluded, "but a culture of bias that has been allowed to persist for far too long." The room erupted into chaos as people reacted to this revelation. The board struggled to maintain order, calling for a brief recess to deliberate on this new information. During the break, Jamal found himself surrounded by a whirlwind of activity. Reporters clamored for comments, fellow students sought his guidance, and he could feel the weight of countless eyes upon him. As the board returned and the room quieted once more, Jamal's heart raced. This was the moment that would determine the future of Westfield High. The board chair stood, her expression grave. "In light of the evidence presented, particularly Mr. Erickson's testimony, it is clear that the issues at Westfield High run deeper than we initially believed. Therefore, this board has decided the following. She paused, the tension in the room reaching a fever pitch. Miss Hawthorne's employment with Westfield High is hereby terminated, effective immediately. A collective gasp rippled through the audience, followed by a mix of cheers and angry shouts. But the chair wasn't finished. Furthermore, we will be launching a comprehensive review of all school policies, curricula, and hiring practices, with the goal of addressing systemic biases and creating a truly inclusive educational environment. The announcement sent shockwaves through the auditorium. It was more than anyone had expected, a clear acknowledgement of the deeper issues at play and a commitment to real, systemic change. As the meeting adjourned and people began to file out, the air was thick with a mix of emotions: relief, anger, hope, and apprehension. Jamal stood rooted to the spot, trying to process what had just happened. Sophia grabbed his hand, her eyes shining with tears of joy and determination. "We did it, Jamal," she said. "This is just the beginning." Looking around at the faces of his fellow students, some celebrating, others looking lost and confused, Jamal realized she was right. This wasn't an ending, but the start of a new chapter for Westfield High. The real work of transforming the school was just beginning. In the wake of the school board's decision, Westfield High found itself thrust into a period of intense transition and soul-searching. Dr. Thompson, reinstated as the lead administrator for the reform process, wasted no time in setting the wheels of change in motion. His first act was to call an all-school assembly. As students and faculty filed into the gymnasium, the air was thick with anticipation and uncertainty. Dr. Thompson took the stage, his presence commanding attention. "Yesterday," he began, his voice steady and resolute, "we as a community took the first step towards addressing a long-standing issue of discrimination and bias in our school. Today, we begin the hard work of healing and transformation." Over the next hour, Dr. Thompson laid out a comprehensive plan for reform. It included the formation of a diversity and inclusion task force, comprising students, teachers, parents, and community leaders. This group would be responsible for reviewing and revising school policies, from disciplinary procedures to curriculum choices. He announced mandatory sensitivity training for all staff members and the introduction of new courses focused on cultural competency and anti-racism. Additionally, he proposed the creation of a student-led committee to provide ongoing feedback and suggestions for improving the school climate. "This process will not be easy," Dr. Thompson warned. "It will require all of us to examine our own biases, to have difficult conversations, and to be open to change. But I believe that together we can create a Westfield High that truly lives up to its potential as a place of learning, growth, and equality for all." The response to Dr. Thompson's speech was mixed. Many students and teachers applauded, energized by the promise of real change. Others sat in stony silence, uncomfortable with the implications of such sweeping reforms. As the assembly dispersed, the hallways buzzed with discussion. Jamal, walking with Sophia and other members of the Students for Equality Coalition, felt a mix of hope and trepidation. They had achieved more than they'd initially hoped for, but the road ahead looked challenging. In the days that followed, the school became a hotbed of activity. The newly formed task force began its work, holding open forums for students and staff to voice their concerns and ideas. These meetings were often heated, with long-held grievances bubbling to the surface and conflicting visions for the school's future clashing. One particularly tense moment came during a forum focused on curriculum reform. A group of parents, led by Robert Hawthorne, attended to voice their opposition to what they called radical changes to the school's educational approach. "You're trying to rewrite history and indoctrinate our children with your political agenda," Robert accused, his face flushed with anger. Sarah Chen, who had been instrumental in pushing for a more diverse and inclusive curriculum, stood to respond. "We're not rewriting history," she said firmly. "We're expanding it to include perspectives and experiences that have been systematically excluded. Our students deserve to see themselves reflected in what they learn." The exchange highlighted the deep divisions that still existed within the community. Dr. Thompson and his team found themselves constantly mediating between different factions, trying to find common ground while staying true to the goal of creating a more equitable school environment. Jamal, now a prominent voice in these discussions, often found himself at the center of both praise and criticism. Some hailed him as a hero for speaking out, while others accused him of causing unnecessary trouble. One afternoon, as Jamal was leaving a particularly contentious task force meeting, he was confronted by a group of students who had been loyal to Miss Hawthorne. "Happy now, Thompson?" one of them sneered. "You've ruined everything. The school's falling apart because of you." Before Jamal could respond, Sophia stepped between them. "The school's not falling apart," she said fiercely. "It's finally facing its problems and trying to become better. If you can't see that, then you're part of the problem." The confrontation was diffused by the timely arrival of Mr. Erickson, who dispersed the group with a stern word. But the incident left Jamal shaken, reminding him of the deep divisions that still ran through the school. As weeks turned into months, the process of reform at Westfield High continued, marked by both progress and setbacks. The Diversity and Inclusion Task Force made significant strides in revising school policies, creating a more equitable disciplinary system, and implementing a new curriculum that better reflected the diverse experiences of the student body. However, resistance to these changes remained strong in some quarters. A group of conservative parents, rallied by Robert Hawthorne, continued to push back against what they saw as radical reforms. They attended every school board meeting, voicing their objections and threatening legal action. Dr. Thompson found himself walking a tightrope, trying to push forward with necessary changes, while also addressing the concerns of those who felt threatened by them. He initiated a series of listening sessions with various stakeholder groups, aiming to build bridges and find areas of common ground. One of these sessions, held with a group of skeptical teachers, proved particularly challenging. "We're not racist," one veteran teacher insisted. "But all this focus on race is creating more division, not less. Can't we just treat everyone the same?" Dr. Thompson took a deep breath before responding. "Treating everyone the same sounds fair in theory," he explained patiently. "But it ignores the very real differences in experiences and opportunities that our students face. True equality means recognizing and addressing these differences, not pretending they don't exist." These conversations were often difficult and emotionally charged, but slowly they began to bear fruit. Some of the initial opposition softened as people started to see the positive impacts of the changes. Jamal, working closely with the student committee, helped organize a series of cultural exchange events that allowed students to share and celebrate their diverse backgrounds. These events, which included food festivals, art exhibitions, and storytelling sessions, helped to foster a greater sense of community and understanding among the student body. Sarah Chen's efforts to diversify the curriculum also began to show results. Students reported feeling more engaged with their studies, seeing themselves represented in the literature they read and the history they studied. Even some initially skeptical parents admitted that their children seemed more enthusiastic about school. As the school year neared its end, Dr. Thompson called another all-school assembly to assess their progress. The atmosphere this time was noticeably different, still charged with energy, but with an undercurrent of hope rather than tension. "We've come a long way," Dr. Nat Thompson acknowledged, "but our journey is far from over. Creating a truly inclusive and equitable school is an ongoing process, one that requires constant vigilance and commitment from all of us." He announced the formation of a permanent Equity and Inclusion Office at Westfield High, tasked with continuing the work they had begun and ensuring that the progress made would not be lost. As the assembly concluded, Jamal found himself surrounded by a diverse group of students, all eager to share their ideas for the coming year. Looking at their excited faces, he felt a surge of pride and hope. They hadn't solved all of Westfield High's problems, but they had started a conversation and a process of change that would continue long after he had graduated. The conflict was far from fully resolved, but Westfield High had taken significant steps towards becoming a more inclusive and equitable institution. The school community had begun the difficult but necessary work of confronting its biases and working towards real, lasting change. As Jamal left the assembly with Sophia, he realized that this experience had not only transformed the school, but had also profoundly changed him. he had discovered a passion for advocacy and a talent for bringing people together. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he felt ready to face them, armed with the knowledge that one voice, raised in pursuit of justice, could indeed make a difference. As the school year drew to a close, Westfield High stood at a crossroads. The tumultuous events of the past months had shaken the institution to its core, exposing deep-seated issues, but also revealing the community's capacity for growth and change. In a bold move that surprised many, Dr. Thompson announced his decision to step down as principal at the end of the academic year. "I believe that for Westfield High to truly move forward, it needs new leadership," he explained at a press conference. "Someone who can build on the foundation we've laid without being tied to the conflicts of the past." His announcement sent ripples through the school community. Some saw it as an admission of defeat, while others recognized it as a selfless act aimed at facilitating the school's continued transformation. Dr. Thompson wasn't leaving the fight for educational equity, however. He revealed his plans to start a nonprofit organization dedicated to promoting diversity and inclusion in schools across the state. "The issues we've confronted at Westfield High are not unique," he said. "It's time to take the lessons we've learned here and use them to drive change on a larger scale." This new direction energized the reform movement at Westfield High. Students, led by Jamal and Sophia, began reaching out to other schools in the district, sharing their experiences and offering support for students looking to address similar issues in their own institutions. The school board, recognizing the importance of continuing the progress made, initiated a nationwide search for a new principal, with a focus on candidates with strong backgrounds in educational equity and community building. As news of Westfield High's transformation spread, the school began to attract positive attention. Educational researchers and policymakers visited to study the changes being implemented, and the school's model for inclusive education started to influence discussions at the state level. Jamal, now preparing for his senior year, found himself at another turning point. His experiences had awakened a passion for social justice and education reform. With encouragement from his parents and teachers, he began to consider a future in education or civil rights law. "You have a gift, Jamal," Mr. Erickson told him during a mentoring session. "You've shown that you can bring people together and drive real change. The world needs more leaders like you." As the school year ended and summer began, there was a sense of anticipation in the air. Westfield High was embarking on a new chapter, one full of challenges, but also brimming with possibility. The upcoming year would bring a new principal, new students, and new challenges. But it would also bring new opportunities to build on the foundation of change that had been laid. Westfield High was no longer just a school. It had become a model for what inclusive, equitable education could look like. For Jamal, his father, and the entire Westfield community, this was not an ending, but a new beginning. A chance to take what they had learned and use it to create lasting change, not just in their school, but in the broader landscape of education. As summer stretched on, Jamal found himself reflecting deeply on the transformative events of the past year. Sitting on the porch of his family's home, he marveled at how much had changed, not just in the school, but in himself. The shy, conflict-averse student who had entered Miss That Hawthorne's class at the beginning of the year was gone. In his place was a young man who had found his voice, who had learned to stand up not just for himself, but for others as well. Jamal thought about the challenges he had faced, the initial fear of speaking out, the backlash from some of his peers, the strain it had put on his relationship with his father. But he also remembered the moments of triumph, the successful school board hearing, the implementation of new, inclusive policies, the cultural exchange events that had brought the student body together. He realized that he had grown not just in confidence, but in empathy and understanding. He had learned to see beyond his own experiences, to recognize the diverse struggles and perspectives of his fellow students. This newfound awareness had changed the way he interacted with others, making him a more thoughtful and inclusive leader. Across town, Dr. Thompson was engaged in his own process of reflection. As he packed up his office at Westfield High, each item sparked memories of the tumultuous year. He felt a mix of sadness at leaving the school he had led for so long, and excitement for the new chapter ahead. He thought about how his relationship with Jamal had evolved. The professional distance they had tried to maintain at school had given way to a deeper, more honest connection. They had become partners in the fight for justice, and in the process, had developed a newfound respect and understanding for each other. Dr. Thompson realized that the experience had changed him as an educator and as a leader. He had been forced to confront his own biases and blind spots, to recognize that even with the best intentions, he had sometimes fallen short in addressing the needs of all his students. This awareness had humbled him, but it had also reignited his passion for educational equity. Sophia, too, had undergone significant growth. The experience of leading the Students for Equality Coalition had awakened a passion for activism and community organizing. She had learned to navigate complex social and political dynamics, to build coalitions across diverse groups, and to persevere in the face of opposition. As she prepared for her senior year, Sophia felt a new sense of purpose. She was determined to ensure that the progress made at Westfield High would continue, and to expand her advocacy to address other social justice issues in her community. Even some of those who had initially resisted the changes found themselves changed by the experience. Sarah Chen, reflecting on the year, realized how much she had learned about the importance of representation and inclusive teaching practices. She was excited to implement these lessons in her classroom in the coming year. Mr. Erickson, nearing retirement, felt a renewed sense of hope for the future of education. Seeing the passion and commitment of students like Jamal and Sophia had reinvigorated him, reminding him why he had become a teacher in the first place. As the summer drew to a close and the new school year approached, there was a sense of anticipation in the air. The members of the Westfield High community, each changed in their own way by the events of the past year, looked forward to the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead. They had learned valuable lessons about the power of speaking up, the importance of inclusivity, and the ongoing nature of the fight for equality. These lessons had transformed them as individuals, and collectively, they had the potential to create lasting change far beyond the wall Westfield High. The first day of the new school year dawned bright and clear, a fitting metaphor for the fresh start at Westfield High. As students streamed through the doors, there was a palpable sense of excitement and possibility in the air. Jamal, now a senior and president of the student council, stood at the entrance, welcoming both familiar faces and newcomers. He couldn't help but reflect on how far they had come and how much further they still had to go. In the auditorium, the new principal, Dr. Amelia Rodriguez, addressed the school community for the first time. Westfield High has been through a period of significant change and growth, she began. Today, we continue that journey together. Our strength lies in our diversity, our commitment to equality, and our willingness to have difficult conversations and make necessary changes. As Jamal listened, he felt a surge of pride and determination. The events of the past year had shown him the power of standing up for what's right, the importance of amplifying marginalized voices, and the potential for positive change when a community comes together. He thought of his father, now working to spread the lessons learned at Westfield High to other schools. He thought of Sophia, continuing her tireless advocacy work. He thought of all the students, teachers, and community members who had played a part in transforming their school. The challenges were far from over. There would always be more work to do, more minds to open, more barriers to break down. But as Jamal looked around at the diverse, energized faces of his fellow students, he felt hopeful. Westfield High had become more than just a school. It was a testament to the power of confronting injustice, the importance of inclusive education, and the potential for growth and change that exists within every community. As the assembly ended and students filed out to begin a new year, there was a shared sense that they were part of something important, an ongoing journey towards a more just and equitable future.